There's a version of you, fully realized, doing the work, living the life, that has existed in your head for years. And everything you've tried has gotten you closer, but never quite there. And that's the part nobody talks about. Because you're not the person who gave up. You're the person who kept going, who read the books, put in the hours, made the sacrifices, and still, the gap remains. So it's not effort. You've proven that already, which means something else is running the show. Something underneath the work, underneath the planning, underneath everything you can see. And right now, someone with your exact goals, your exact level of drive, is crossing the finish line you've been working toward, but because they understood something about themselves that you haven't found yet. That's the 1% gap. And in the next minutes, you're going to see exactly what's living inside it. Here's what the self-improvement industry sold you. That the people achieving your goals simply want it more. That they wake up earlier, push harder, suffer longer, that success is a volume game. More input, more output. And you believed it. So you added more. More habits, more routines, more systems, more pressure on yourself every time the results didn't match the effort. But here's the problem with that model. You've already proven it wrong with your own life. You're not here because you stopped trying. You're here because no matter how hard you push, the goals stay out of reach, and something keeps pulling you back to the same place, which means the answer isn't on the surface. It never was. The people crossing the finish line you've been working toward aren't operating with more effort. They're operating with a completely different internal architecture. And once you see what that architecture looks like, you can't unsee it. That's exactly what we're going to break down. 4 specific things. And by the end of this video, you'll know precisely where your gap is and what to do about it.
Here's the one nobody talks about, and it's probably the reason everything else has felt harder than it should. What if the thing blocking you has nothing to do with your goals at all? Every goal you've ever set, you set it from the outside. A number, a title, a result. But the person you believe you are on the inside, that picture hasn't changed. And your brain every single day is working overtime to make your actions match that picture. Not your goals, your identity. This is called identity lag. The gap between who you're trying to become and who you still believe you are. And here's why this matters for everything we're about to cover. Every habit you build, every system you create, every strategy you try, it all runs on top of this. Which means if the foundation is misaligned, none of it sticks. Not because you're weak, because you're human. The brain doesn't chase goals. It protects identity. This one is going to be uncomfortable because it's not about you. Most people spend their entire lives optimizing themselves, their mindset, their habits, their discipline, and completely ignore the thing that's quietly setting the ceiling on all of it, your environment. Not just the people around you, everything you're exposed to daily, the conversations you're in, the content you consume, the rooms you sit in, the problems people around you think are normal. Here's what the research actually shows. Your brain doesn't form ambitions in isolation. It builds them from what it sees as possible. And what it sees as possible is almost entirely determined by what's closest to you. Which means the person next to you isn't just influencing your mood, they're influencing your ceiling. And here's the part that makes this genuinely dangerous. You can't see it happening. It doesn't feel like limitation. It feels like reality. Like just the way things are. Like a reasonable assessment of what's actually achievable for someone in your position. The people achieving your goals didn't just think differently. They stood in different rooms, had different conversations, were surrounded by people for whom your goal wasn't a dream, it was just a Tuesday. That's not motivation, that's architecture, and you can change it deliberately. But even if you fix your identity and redesign your environment, there's still something that will stop you every single time you get close.
And it's the one gap most people never see coming. The people achieving your goals aren't more disciplined. They've just, either by accident or by design, built an identity that makes the right actions feel natural, inevitable even. You haven't fixed that yet, but now you know it exists. Gap 3. This is the gap nobody ever admits to, because it doesn't look like failure from the inside. You didn't quit. You never quit. You just responded to that email a little later, pushed the launch date back a little further, spent a little more time planning before executing, told yourself you weren't ready yet, that the timing wasn't right, that you needed one more piece before you moved. And every single one of those decisions felt completely reasonable in the moment. That's what makes this gap the most dangerous one on this list. Because quitting has a face. You can see it. You can fight it. But the invisible retreat, it looks like wisdom. It sounds like strategy. It feels like patience. It's none of those things. The people who actually care, the ones putting in the work, the ones who never fully stop, are the most vulnerable to this.
Because the more intelligent you are, the better your brain is at building the case for slowing down, not excuses. Reasons. Logical, well-constructed, completely believable reasons. The people achieving your goals aren't braver. They've just learned to recognize the retreat before it happens. To see that reasonable voice in their head for exactly what it is. A very sophisticated way of staying safe. You now have 3 of the 4 gaps. And the last one is the reason the first 3 never fully close, no matter how much work you put in.
Gap 4. This is the one that ties everything together. You've had feedback, more than enough of it. Things that didn't work, attempts that fell short, results that didn't match the effort. You've collected all of it. But here's what most people do with it. They either look outward, wrong timing, wrong market, wrong circumstances, or they look inward and turn it into a story about who they are, what they're capable of, whether this is really meant for them. Both of those responses feel natural. Neither of them moves you forward. The people achieving your goals do something different with the exact same information. They don't ask, why did this happen to me? They ask, what is this showing me? One question closes the loop. The other one keeps you stuck inside it. That single shift, from meaning-making to lesson extracting, is what keeps the feedback loop running. And a running loop is what closes the identity gap, raises the ceiling on your environment, and catches the invisible retreat before it takes hold. This is why it's the last gap, not because it's the most dramatic, but because without it, the other 3 never fully resolve. Here's the thing about everything you just heard. It's not new information. Not really. Some part of you already knew your identity was working against you, already felt the ceiling your environment was quietly setting, already recognized that voice that made slowing down feel like wisdom, already knew you were turning feedback into a story instead of a lesson. You just didn't have the language for it. And that's the most expensive kind of knowledge. The thing you sense but can't name. Because you can't fix what you can't see clearly. So here's the real question this video is asking. Not which gap is yours. You already know that. You've known for a while. So why aren't you doing anything about it? That question isn't rhetorical. Because most people at this point will nod, close the tab, and go back to exactly what they were doing. Not because they don't care. Because knowing and moving are 2 completely different skills. And nobody ever taught you the second one. There's a journal that was built exactly for this moment. It's not a self-help book. It's not a productivity system.
It's a minimalist journal. 5 short chapters, each one followed by a writing exercise with space to actually do it. You read, you reflect, you write. And by the time you close it, something has already shifted. It was built for the person who has read everything, understood everything, and still hasn't moved. The overthinker who's finally done overthinking. Not looking for another framework, just a push. Straight off the edge of the page and into real life. It's called The Art of Doing. The link is in the description. And if anything in this video felt uncomfortably familiar, it was made for you. Now, back to the gap. The version of you that's fully realized, doing the work, living the life, that version isn't waiting for better circumstances, better timing, a cleaner slate. That version is waiting for you to close the gap. And you now have everything you need to start. The close and landing. The 1% gap was never about talent. It was never about time. It was never about how badly you wanted it. It was always about what was running underneath. Identity, environment, the invisible retreat, the story you told about what the feedback meant. 4 gaps. And every single one of them is closable. Not because success is easy, but because the distance between you and the people achieving your goals was never as big as it felt. It was just invisible.
Now it isn't. The only question left is a simple one. What are you going to do differently tomorrow? You already know the answer. You always did. Peace.